You decided to try intermittent fasting. You read about it, you committed to it. You did 16 hours without food every single day. And something felt off. You were more tired. Your clothes fit differently, but not in a good way. Your muscles felt softer, weaker. And yet every influencer online told you this was the key to living longer. Here is the uncomfortable truth. If you are over 50, the fasting protocol designed for a 30-year-old body is not just ineffective. It can actively speed up the very aging you are trying to prevent. And the worst part? Most people doing it have no idea it is happening. Welcome to Second Prime, where we dig into the science of aging without the hype. Today, we are covering intermittent fasting after 50, what the research actually says, what the standard advice gets dangerously wrong, and the modified protocol that gives you all the benefits without accelerating muscle loss, bone loss, or hormonal disruption. Let's start with why intermittent fasting became popular in the first place, because the benefits are real, and we need to acknowledge that. Fasting triggers autophagy, your body's cellular cleaning process, where old damaged proteins are broken down and recycled. It improves insulin sensitivity, reduces chronic inflammation, and in animal studies, it consistently extends lifespan. A 2025 review in Cell Metabolism confirmed that modified time-restricted eating preserves autophagy benefits and improves metabolic markers. The problem is not fasting itself. The problem is that every study cited by fasting influencers was conducted on younger adults, typically between 25 and 40 years old. After 50, your body operates under completely different biological rules. So what changes after 50? Let's go through the 3 mechanisms that make standard intermittent fasting dangerous for older adults. The first and most serious risk is accelerated muscle loss, sarcopenia. A 2024 JAMA Internal Medicine study found that adults over 50 practicing intermittent fasting lost significantly more lean mass compared to younger fasters on the same protocol. Here is why. After 50, your muscles develop what researchers call anabolic resistance. This means your muscle cells require a higher dose of amino acids, especially leucine, to trigger protein synthesis. When you fast for 16 hours, your body runs low on amino acids and turns to muscle protein for fuel. In a young person, the eating window easily compensates. In an older adult with anabolic resistance, that window is often not enough. You lose muscle faster than you build it back. And sarcopenia, according to the Journal of Cachexia, sarcopenia and muscle doubles your mortality risk. This is not a cosmetic issue. The second mechanism is hormonal disruption, and this is where women over 50 face a particularly sharp risk. Intermittent fasting raises cortisol. That is a normal short-term stress response, and in younger people, it resolves quickly. But in postmenopausal women, cortisol is already running higher due to the drop in estrogen. Estrogen acts as a cortisol buffer. When it disappears at menopause, prolonged fasting states can tip the hormonal balance into a chronic stress state. Research published in Endocrine Reviews in 2025 documented that postmenopausal women on 16-hour or longer fasting protocols showed measurably elevated evening cortisol and disrupted sleep architecture. Chronically elevated cortisol does 3 damaging things. It breaks down muscle tissue, it suppresses thyroid function, and it disrupts insulin sensitivity. the very thing fasting was supposed to fix. For women over 50, the standard 16.8 protocol can end up being biochemically counterproductive. The third mechanism is bone density loss, and this one flies completely under the radar. Your bones are living tissue. They are constantly broken down by osteoclasts and rebuilt by osteoblasts. This process requires a steady supply of protein, calcium, and vitamin D across the day. When you compress all your eating into an 8-hour window and consume less food overall, which most fasters do accidentally, you deprive your bones of the nutrients they need to rebuild. The Journal of Bone and Mineral Research published data in 2024 showing that adults over 50 on caloric restriction patterns, consistent with aggressive intermittent fasting, showed statistically significant reductions in bone mineral density at the hip and lumbar spine within 12 months. This is especially dangerous for women who are already losing bone density at an accelerated rate after menopause due to declining estrogen. 3 mechanisms, 3 risks, and every single one of them is avoidable if you use the right protocol. The protein timing mistake is the single fastest fix you can make. Research from the SPN Expert Group on Aging and Protein Nutrition shows that older adults need 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, substantially more than the standard recommendation of 0.8 grams. But quantity alone is not enough. Because of anabolic resistance, you also need to distribute that protein correctly. Specifically, you need at least 30 to 40 grams of high-quality protein per meal, with leucine content above 3 grams, to cross the muscle protein synthesis threshold. Cramming all your protein into 1 or 2 meals during a compressed eating window frequently results in sub-threshold doses at each sitting. The fix is simple. Never break your fast with a low-protein meal. Break it with eggs, salmon, Greek yogurt, or a leucine-rich shake. Front-load your protein. Make it the priority, not an afterthought. Your protocol is simple. 3 to 4 sessions of Zone 2 per week, 45 minutes each. Talk test, heart rate, or nasal breathing to find your intensity. After 4 weeks, add 1 interval session. Stay consistent for 20 weeks. That is it. That is the most evidence-backed path to a longer life that exists in the research today. If you found this valuable, subscribe. We publish 2 videos every week on the longevity science most doctors are too busy to explain. And leave a comment. What is your current exercise routine, and are you going to try Zone 2? Tell us where you are starting from. We read every single one. The third fix is protecting your bones during any fasting protocol. This means 2 specific actions. First, never allow your daily calcium intake to drop below 1,200 milligrams, the recommended threshold for adults over 50 from the National Osteoporosis Foundation. When your eating window shrinks, calcium intake almost always shrinks with it, unless you are deliberately tracking it. Second, pair your calcium with vitamin D3 at a minimum of 2,000 IU per day, because without adequate D3, intestinal calcium absorption drops dramatically. A practical hack: include 1 serving of full-fat Greek yogurt or sardines in your first meal after breaking the fast. Both are extremely dense in calcium, protein, and, in the case of sardines, omega-3 fatty acids that further reduce bone inflammation. These are not optional additions. After 50, they are structural requirements. Now let's talk about the autophagy sweet spot, because this is what most people actually want from fasting, and it is absolutely achievable. Autophagy begins measurably around the 12-hour fasting mark in most adults and deepens between 14 and 18 hours. But here is what the longevity research actually shows. You do not need to fast for 18 or 20 hours every day to get meaningful autophagy. Consistent 13 to 14-hour overnight fasts, 5 to 6 days per week, combined with moderate exercise, which independently upregulates autophagy, produce comparable cellular cleaning benefits to aggressive daily 16-hour fasts without the hormonal and muscular cost. The research from Cell Metabolism used this exact modified protocol and found improved autophagy markers, better insulin sensitivity, and preserved lean mass in adults over 50. You get the benefit without the damage. That is not a compromise. That is a smarter strategy. Before we get to the exact action steps, there is one more thing you need to know about the cardiovascular data, because this is where it gets genuinely alarming. A 2025 observational study published in Circulation showed that eating windows of less than 8 hours, OMAD and aggressive 16.8 adherence, were associated with significantly elevated cardiovascular mortality risk in adults over 50. The hazard ratio was 2.35. Meaning these individuals were more than twice as likely to die from cardiovascular causes. Separate research in Science Translational Medicine found that near isocaloric time-restricted eating, same calories, just compressed window, shifted circadian clocks but did not improve cardiometabolic health in women. This matters because the assumption that compressing your eating window is automatically beneficial for heart health is simply not supported by the current evidence for older adults. The relationship is dose-dependent, and you can absolutely pass the point of diminishing returns. Here is the protocol the research actually supports for adults over 50. Call it the 13-11 method. Stop eating by 7 p.m. Eat breakfast by 8 a.m. the following day. That gives you a 13-hour overnight fast that triggers autophagy, supports circadian rhythm, and avoids the cortisol and muscle catabolism associated with longer fasts. Within your eating window, prioritize protein at every meal, a minimum of 30 grams per sitting, with leucine-rich sources, eggs, meat, fish, dairy, or legumes for plant-based eaters. Hit 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily without exception. Include calcium and vitamin D3 at the levels we discussed. Do not fast more than 5 days per week. Allow 2 days where you eat normally without a restricted window. This gives your hormonal system recovery time, especially for women. And add resistance training at least twice per week, because exercise is the most powerful autophagy trigger we know of. And it also directly counters the sarcopenia risk. You can fast intelligently after 50. You just cannot fast the same way you would at 30. Point 2. The Stanford Breakthrough, and why it's a genuinely big deal. Published in March 2026, the study identified exactly how aging gut bacteria hijack your brain. Here's the 3-step mechanism. Step 1. As you age, a specific bacteria called parabacteroids goldsteinii increases in abundance in your gut. Step 2. This bacteria produces medium-chain fatty acids that trigger inflammation in the myeloid immune cells lining your intestines. Step 3, and this is the critical part, that inflammation disrupts the vagus nerve signal to the hippocampus, which is your brain's memory formation center. The hippocampus essentially goes quiet, and without those incoming signals, it stops forming new memories efficiently. What's remarkable is what happened when researchers tested the reverse. Young mice given old microbiomes developed memory problems within weeks. Germ-free older mice, raised without any gut bacteria, maintained sharp cognition. And when researchers stimulated the vagus nerve directly in cognitively impaired older mice, those animals recovered memory function to young animal levels. The lead researcher described it